What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Ableton Music Producer Podcast. This is Dan Giffen. Today, we have an awesome guest with Gordi. We also have a special feature with Line 6, the company, talking about their Helix native plugin. So we've got a lot of good stuff lined up for you today. Quick shout out before we jump into the episode. Wanted to let you know I created a cheat sheet or a guide of all of my favorite Ableton Live 11 shortcuts with the new release of Live. It also includes a lot of essential shortcuts from the previous versions of Live that you should know. So if you want to download that for free, there's over 35 shortcuts in there I think could really help you out and help you produce faster. Producing faster is always more fun. So if you want that for free, go to liveproducersonline.com/live11 shortcuts, all one word. That's /live11, the number 11 shortcuts on liveproducersonline.com. So check that out. Also want to give a huge shout out to my friends from the company Melodics. If you aren't familiar with Melodics yet, or if you haven't downloaded the software, go to melodics.com. Check it out. It's a desktop app. You can download it. You can plug in almost any MIDI controller and then start practicing every day. They have a bunch of lessons you can practice and step up your skills, producing or finger drumming, playing keys. They also even have like an electric drum set lesson so you can practice playing your electric drum kit. There's a lot of good content in there, a lot of different genres to practice to keep it entertaining. It's really helped me improve playing my scales and keyboard, so it could do the same for you. Melodics.com, use the discount code LPO-20, that's LPO-20, save yourself some money if you join the subscription, and there is a free trial, so go grab that free trial and check it out. Without wasting any more time, let's jump into this interview that I had with Klein. He is the Chief Product Design Architect for Line 6. He also works with Ampeg and Yamaha and is an absolute genius in the hardware and software world of music production. So here's a quick chat that I had with him about Line 6's Helix native plugin, and then we'll jump into today's episode with Gordi. Thanks for joining the podcast. I invited you guys on just to talk about Helix Native, which is your guitar plugin. And I'm going to be honest with you, I've been a guitar rig junkie for a while. I've used other guitar emulations. There's a lot of good ones out there, but out of the box, a lot of the presets I fell in love with, and just the interface is really simple to use for anybody who's been using DAWs. I think it's a pretty easy, just plug and play. So I just want to pick your brain and kind of talk about it. Obviously, this is the Ableton Music Producer Podcast. So, there's people here that could probably take advantage of some of the automations and things inside of the plugin itself. But just troubleshooting it on my own for anybody listening, like it's very CPU friendly, which is a big deal for me because I sometimes play guitar on stage live, and having like a line in, you can really control the sound on stage, as you know. But tell me a little bit about your experience with it, how it works, and maybe talk about some of the technical aspects of the plugin as well and how you use it.
Oh, yeah. So what's interesting is, though, even though I'm officially the product manager for all Helix and HX and Effects products at Line 6, my dirty, dark secret is Helix Native is the only one I actually use actively. So I have this old 2010 Mac Pro. It has like 40 gigs of RAM in it, but trying to put the finishing touches on this record I've been working on for better part of a decade. Most songs have 24, sometimes 30 instances of it.
Wow.
And not all of them are just like full signal paths full of stuff. Sometimes it's stereo mods into stereo delays into stereo reverbs, and then I flip the phase of one to give it this crazy stereo spread, and I put that on the background vocal effects bus or something.
Yeah. Well, and for people who maybe aren't familiar, we talk about Helix Native as the plugin, but then you have Helix, the hardware, which has been really popular for a while.
Yeah, I mean, the original goal of Helix Native was this thing that's kind of markety, but it's true, and that's the whole studio to stage and back paradigm. Because what we found is, we have a lot of artists that work with us, and they'll hire some tone junkie preset guru to listen to the record and then convert all of those sounds into a massive switching pedal board or a rack mount modeler or something for stage. And it takes weeks to do, and sometimes thousands of dollars to hire somebody.
Yeah.
We thought, well, what if you just use the plugin on the record, and then when you're ready to go, you just drag the presets over to the editor and they magically show up in your hardware exactly the same way. What used to take weeks now takes 5 seconds.
So nice.
And then when you're out on tour and you're in the hotel rooms or in the bus, you're going and working on stuff on the new record, and you have your laptop. And then when you're ready to record, you just transfer those back into the plugin, and all your tones for the next record are finished. So the workflow was so important that we decided, well, let's really incentivize our Helix owners. So we give them like a 75% discount if they happen to own Helix or HX hardware. It's not an inexpensive plugin. It's $400, but if you happen to have a $600 HX stomp, the plugin's now $99. So
yeah, that's nice. Yeah, we love to save money. It's an expensive hobby that we have sometimes.
Oh yeah.
But no, that's a great product. I'm a big fan. I've only played with it really for about a week now, but I love a lot of the workflows, and you can save your own custom set lists and be able to have lots of different banks to like pull up and recall really quick and switch through real time. You talked about the hardware, but like, what are some other favorite features with Helix that you hear from users?
Clearly, the big advantage is having, almost 90 amps or preamps and over 200 effects at your disposal, and being able to chain them in any order, in parallel or, in serial, and you can run up to 32 simultaneously. The way I use it, and the big advantage I see is, especially if you're trying to create music very quickly. I don't know if any of your listeners have like 500 series modules, like Radial make a bunch where you can route pedals into, insert any guitar pedal into your DAW really easily. All it does, it's just mainly a line shifter and an impedance matching circuit, right? And I was doing that for the longest time, and it allowed me to, it's like, oh, cool, I have this gigantic array of pedals. I can go and mess with stuff. And if I want to run, I don't know, like a rat on vocals, I can just insert it and go.
Yeah.
And the way Ben and Sam and Ryan and the sound design team, they go, I mean, it's all component level modeling. It's not like, oh, let's tweak a couple filters to make it kind of sound rat-like. It's like every single weird little intricacy and side effect for, and the things that make pedals sound bad in some ways.
Yeah.
They'll just self-oscillate, and they'll get really weird, and they'll behave in bizarre, creepy ways. And that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And like, well, wait, I can run that on a sawtooth bass line or something like that.
Yeah.
And it does the same thing. Like, you play the key on the keyboard and you let it ring out. You're like, oh, it's like inserting that real pedal into your rig, except, now you're dealing with, compensated latency, and you don't have to worry about all of that madness and actually hooking things up. And it's perfectly recallable. And you can run 20 of them at the same time. It's so just speeding up the workflow and being able to just step through 30, 40 distortion pedals just by having like, oh, whoa, that's crazy. All right, let me tweak a couple sliders. Perfect. Then you're on to the next track.
Yeah, I've been flipping through the effects. I threw some of the pedals and amps on like a piano loop that I found before we jumped on this call with Helix. Just sounded really dope. And Ableton Live obviously gives you tons of effects to work with, but when it comes to guitar emulations, I just haven't been a huge fan. Amp is kind of cool, and cab is kind of cool, and Ableton's audio effects, but it's nothing compared to something like Helix. That's like, the entire software is built for like these really good guitar effects and emulations.
I would say that they tend to be a bit more forgiving. So it's easier to kind of slap them on. Whereas, you play guitar, so you know that if you happen to boost your signal, say the volume pot on your guitar happened to have an extra 20% on it, it's going to totally change the tone of your guitar, and it's going to sound fucking weird.
Yeah.
So imagine now you have your audio interface, and the instrument input is controlled by the input knob. If you happen to goose that input knob by just a little bit, suddenly it doesn't sound like the real amp anymore, because the amp is behaving like it received a boost pedal. And so you do have to be really careful about the input level on Helix Native. So you want to stick around 18 to 24, minus 18 to 24 dB. And then that is sort of the sweet spot.
Yeah.
We do that because the amps are designed to behave like the amps, and we don't do anything to try to compensate or make things easier necessarily.
Yeah, adding that realism to the digital world. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, but we've been doing this a long time. So, I started out with a Line 6 amp, and then I had the pod and, and a Marshall JMP1 rack mount and a Sans amp and all that stuff. And then when I got my Pro Tools rig in 99, I got Amp Farm and Echo Farm. I'm like, oh, this is my sound, done. And Line 6 was the first company to make modeling products for your computer, like plugins. Creamware, I think, did some modeling of compressors maybe, but as far as amp modeling, absolutely. I mean,
I didn't realize that.
And it was used on countless records in the late 90s and the 2000s, and that was my go-to sound for over a decade. And so we've been doing it so long that, you know, back then computers were much slower, so it was all about optimization for specific, you know, Intel processors, and that, you know, at the time was Motorola processors. But so our team, you know, they can optimize very well. So in the same amount of CPU cycles, you know, another company, it might take up, you know, might get half the instances you might get in the DAW project. So and of course the DSP is optimized for hardware as well, and the hardware, you know, we're running two 450 megahertz Shark chips. So if you can imagine optimizing for that, and then you now have, you can click a little button in the settings in the plugin to say, hey, I don't want this to act like Helix's limitations. I want to open it up so I can run all 32 things at once. So
that's brilliant. Yeah, man, that's great. Well, I love what you guys are doing with the guitar emulations. Obviously, the hardware side as well is crucial for touring, traveling guitarists who want that stage tone exactly as they have it in the studio. I also was playing with some of the automation controller design tab inside Helix Native. That was really fun. You can quickly assign and MIDI map knobs, say to my MIDI keyboard if you didn't even want to use it for guitar and want to use it on other sounds. But you guys have a 14-day free trial as well. So if anybody wanted to test it out for free, everybody loves free trials. Give it a try, download it, play with it. I also know there's a big St. Paddy's Day discount that you guys are repping. So if you're listening to this right now, this episode is released the day before St. Paddy's Day, I believe. So if it's not too late, go to the Line 6 website, which is just line6.com. There's also an educational discount program too for those who are students out there that want to save their piggy bank a little bit more.
Yep. Right around St. Paddy's Day, we're hoping to release new firmware 3.1. Comes with another amp, 4 new effects, and some pretty cool additional parameters and features in existing effects as well. One might argue we actually have the best polyphonic pitch shifting of any plugin available that runs in real time.
Those are big.
Not like Melodyne, you know, that's all that has to load into RAM, but just throwing on stuff. It's really cool. It's fun thing about Helix Native is we're constantly improving it, and we've added countless additional amps and effects, and that happens multiple times a year, and we're always trying to improve it. And we take a lot of cues from our end users. If they say they don't like something, we go in and fix it.
I appreciate your time, man. It was good hanging with you. Everybody go check out the Helix Native plugin, download it, put it on all the different instruments, get weird with it. It's a fun thing. It sounds great. I love it. Ooh. I appreciate the free download. I really love it. I love it. Right on. Yeah, man. Well, have a good weekend. If you ever come to Indianapolis for whatever reason, hit me up.
Absolutely. We will.
Cool. Sounds good, man. So for anybody listening right now, if you don't know who Gordi is, Sophie is an artist named Gordi. She's a folktronica singer-songwriter from Australia. She's been featured in multiple TV series and films like The Walking Dead. She's had music in Vampire Diaries. She's supported major artists like Bon Iver of Monsters and Men, Tallest Man on Earth. Also sang backup vocals, fun fact, on The Tonight Show. Is that right, for Bon Iver back in the day?
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, and congrats on your recent album, R2 Skins, which I'd love to talk about the process behind that today as well. But congrats. It was nominated for Best Adult Contemporary Album, Australian Music Prize, Australian Album of the Year. Those are some good things to put in your back pocket.
It sounds very nice when you put it all like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Good portfolio you've got going. But yeah, so you are in Melbourne. We were just talking about that. And how are things over there right now?
Yeah, things are pretty good here. I think we are relatively very fortunate, when compared with the rest of the world. 2020 was, I was in Melbourne, so we were in lockdown for 7 months. I think Melbourne had up until that point had the world's longest lockdown. Which was totally gnarly and awful. But, as a result, there's now zero community transmission basically. And so we're able to sort of get back to a semblance of normal life. And I've actually just been playing shows, which was like wild. It was just crazy to actually like play music to real people. Although the week that I was playing in Melbourne, there was like a small, like one of the kind of Europe COVID strains got out. And so there was like a 5-day sort of total lockdown, which like ended the day before I was supposed to play a show. But then they sort of had all these new restrictions. So I had to split the show into 2 sittings. So play to like 2 sort of half full rooms. But like, I don't know, at this stage, I'm just happy to play. So whatever it takes, really.
No, it's nice to not play for like a TV screen, and just
Yeah.
that energy, like real human interaction goes a long way.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, you know, putting this record out last year and people kind of ask, yeah, how do you think it went? And like, obviously there are like metrics you can measure, but I feel like I can never really know until I'm like looking at someone, you know, in the face, playing it to them, like looking at a room full of people who are like engaging with the songs. So it was a really nice feeling.
That's so cool. Yeah, I look forward to doing more big shows again in the nearish future, whatever normal looks like. It's actually really interesting because you studied in the medical field, right? I read online that you got pretty involved, like using your degree and helping combat COVID.
Yeah, essentially, I had worked in like throughout 2019 as a doctor full time. Like I was doing my junior year, like in a hospital after I'd finished university. And then my plan was in 2020 to quit, which I did. And then I flew to Europe and like was sort of promoting this record. I played a few shows and then was supposed to be touring with Monsters and Men all through the States and then opening for Bon Iver on their sort of stadium tour in Australia. And I was in London in March. Like everything was just, you know, no one knew what was going on, but like everyone knew something bad was happening. And then I saw on Twitter that America was closing its borders. And I was like, holy shit, I don't know, that was like the first time I was like, this is actually like a huge, huge thing that's not going to go away. And so then I went home to Australia. And for the first few months I was there, I was just like scrambling to be like, what am I going to do? All my plans just like totally went up in smoke. And also Australia wasn't particularly hard hit in that first sort of wave. And so I actually couldn't even get a medical job. Like I'd put my name down sort of to be like, I'm available. But, you know, they just didn't need the staffing. Like all my friends who worked in hospitals said like just day after day, they'd be like waiting in the emergency room and just like no one would come. And eventually like it all sort of died down. I put this record out in the middle of the year and then Melbourne had a big second wave. I mean, not big by comparison to the rest of the world, but big by what Australia had experienced. And then I got the call finally, like probably 7 months after I put my name down, you know, with the sort of health services.
Yeah.
And they were like, we actually need, you know, we need you, or we need like young doctors to fill in these roles. And so I, started picking up shifts in Melbourne from sort of August, September, right through to the end of January. Yeah, you know, would rock up at the hospital, put on like friggin' like level 4 PPE, totally wrapped in plastic and just like sweating like yeah, all day.
I'm gonna have to wear a mask at the grocery store for 30 minutes. I couldn't imagine doing it all day in a hazmat suit or whatever. Also, they should have just hired you to play for the patients. You just go in there.
I know. Have my guitar wrapped in PPE, like plastic.
Yeah, music therapy is a real thing. So there you go.
Yeah, I'd have to do it. I think like a Flaming Lips vibe, where I just came in my own bubble and like rolled throughout the hospital.
That'd be amazing. One of those giant hamster balls for people, like rolling way through. You just have a little.
Yeah.
That really is what needs to happen. You actually had some cool opportunities. Speaking of not even being able to play shows, to play a show at the Sydney Opera House, right?
Yeah, we were working out how to like promote the damn record because we were like the normal way you do it, which is through touring. We couldn't. And the Opera House, like, I mean, I think everywhere around the world, venues and stuff, like in those first few months were sort of scrambling, being like, how are we going to survive? How are we going to bring entertainment and arts to people? And the Opera House launched this like digital series. And they approached us being like, do you think at some point like you'd want to maybe play a show here? And I was like, yes.
Yes.
And so we were like, you know, it could actually be really sick if we did it like the sort of album launch. So essentially we did it a month after the record came out, a couple of weeks. And it was, yeah, I don't think I've ever been so nervous, because the Opera House, I mean, for anyone, but especially for an Australian, is like, you know, that's sort of like the venue that you kind of dream of. And I'd never played any of these songs live. And so I got together with my band. We had to all like, because we were flying interstate and stuff, we had to like do these quarantine periods. And then we got together and like rehearsed for 5 days for this performance. And yeah, there was not a soul like sitting in the actual theatre. But there's like a woman side of stage being like, and you're on in 10, 9, 8, and then like miming, counting to us. And I was like so damn nervous, but it was amazing. It was really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, it was a great video too. And anybody listening, you can go watch it on YouTube, the replay of this live stream we were talking about. You did a great job. You had so many different instruments and things happening on stage. Kind of surprised, because listening to a lot of your music in the past, it's very minimal, like as far as like more open and stripped down, but you had a lot of live components happening on the stage. And Ableton.com actually did a really great feature on you, talking about the album, how it was like recorded. And I would love to talk about some of the details of that, because you did a lot of really interesting sampling, including, didn't you try to sample some cockatoos or something like in the process, which is great.
Yeah.
They didn't make it in the album though. It's slightly disappointing. But maybe talk about, for anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, the process behind the song or the album Our Two Skins, right?
Yeah.
And you recorded it on a family farm, didn't you? Like,
yeah, that's it.
Tiny cottage place.
Yeah. So essentially, like, backtracking for a minute, in 2018 I was on tour with this guy Sean Carey, who plays as S. Carey, who plays in Bon Iver, and S. Carey's Sean's kind of, you know, own project. And he and I had like collaborated a bit, and I sang on his record and he'd sung on mine. And in 2018, I was like kind of floating around the States, and Sean was like, do you want to come on tour with us and like just play in my band? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And so we spent 6 weeks kind of driving around the States, playing all over. Two of the people in his sort of crew were Zach Hansen, who was playing drums, who I'd actually met before, when he was playing with The Tallest Man on Earth. And then Zach had sort of helped me finish my first record. And then I spent 6 weeks sitting in the backseat of the bus with another guy named Chris Messina, who is sort of like the right-hand guy for Justin Vernon from Bon Iver. And yeah, we just like got on like a house on fire, and I was like making demos on Ableton in the backseat of the bus, like throughout the whole tour. I'd like record something on my phone and like airdrop it to my laptop and just make these like shitty demos. And I then like Chris and Zach at the end of that period were like, we don't know how you're going to make your record, but we'd love to be involved if that's something that you'd be like interested in. And I was like, yeah, that could be cool. Like, I have no idea what it's going to sound like yet, but I'll keep that in mind. Yeah. And then I kept touring all year. I finished writing the actual record. And then at the end of the year, I sort of decided that it would be cool to make it at home. I'd spent so much time overseas, and I just felt like I needed to sort of spend some time in Canowindra, where I'm from, where my parents live. Yeah. And I grew up on a farm there, and there's like a little cottage that sits in the middle of like a bunch of fields, and right next to like the sheep shearing shed, and next to a hay shed, and there's next to like a dusty track that has like purple dirt. It like was sort of, no one was living in it. It was pretty run down and had like electricity to half the house, and like there were rats in it and stuff. And I said to my parents, I was like, do you mind if I come here and make a record? And they were like, why would you want to do that? But sure. And so like I emailed Chris and Zach, and I was like, what do you guys think about coming over here? And they were like, hell yeah, that'd be really fun. So we like basically had no kind of internet connection, no phone reception, no nothing for 4 weeks. And we would just like drive my like dad's little like farm buggy over to the cottage each morning, load in. Chris would like light some incense, and Zach would like put on some record, and then we just kind of sit there and chill for a bit, and then we just get into making the record. And yeah, at about 4:30 p.m. each day, there's this big gum tree outside like the house, as like the house kind of looks down to like a river, and there's this big gum tree and all these cockatoos, these like native Australian birds. They're really beautiful, but they're like
Super
just
loud.
noisy as shit. And they like would come in every day and just be like, rah, rah. And so we sort of were like, maybe this will be cool. And we recorded it and we're like, that's definitely not cool. But there were lots of other like things that were happening around us, like trucks rolling in, and you know, everything sounds fine if you like pitch it down 4 octaves. So that kind of became our
Wash
vibe.
it out with reverb, put a filter on it.
Exactly. Well, I have like my shitty little Subaru car that I drive around. One night we like had gone back for dinner, and then we came back to the studio, and I was just like being an idiot and like revving the car outside. And Chris was like, let's like get that. And so he like recorded it on a field recorder. And then we went back in and we pitched it down a few octaves. And that's like, that runs throughout the entirety of Aeroplane Bathroom, the first track on the record.
That's a great music video too, by the way. I watched that too.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was a great song. That's hilarious. So it's just like a car engine just like chilling in the background of the song.
Yeah.
That's so funny. I think I know what sound that is. That was just That's amazing. But no cockatoo, unfortunately.
No cockatoos. Yeah, we sort of thought they sounded, it just wasn't quite the vibe. But there's like I've got like videos of like, you know, like Zach being like, and go, and Chris like really gently sort of swinging this gate open as if like there was a proper way to do it, which there wasn't.
Footage like from this entire experience somewhere.
Oh, I've got so much. And it was honestly like, I was talking to another artist the other day, and who's like, you know, has progressed a reasonable amount through their career. And they were talking about the idea of like being excited. And they're like, you know, when you first start out as an artist and like everything excites you, like you get a song on the radio, you get some support for a tour, you play at a venue, you're like, I'm just so like excited by all of this. And it is like, you know, it is the case that I guess you become slightly desensitized. So maybe something that excited you once upon a time as you progress through your career, like doesn't quite give you that same like level of excitement. I think it's true for everything.
Yeah.
And making this record was like, it was sort of the first time in a while that I'd had that like almost like child level of excitement. Like when like I believed in Santa, like when I would like wake up before like on Christmas morning and be like,
wait, you don't believe in Santa? Is that
sorry for anybody listening to this.
Like what? You can't say that on this podcast.
we have a big fan base under 12. So you know, like it was kind of like this whole, like I would wake up each morning to go into the studio and just like I slept so badly the entire time because I just would like, all I wanted to do was like be in there the whole time making this record.
That's so cool. Yeah, and I think that inspiration is a huge part of the creative process. And so being able to like do that in your roots back home on your family cottage, like I'm sure that like just brought out an entirely different process than it would have been going to any other studio.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing really, because like this record in particular was, I mean, I don't think I've ever really written a song that's not sort of rooted in something personal, but like this album in particular was so deeply personal, like detailed a pretty sort of tumultuous period of my life where I was finishing uni and I was like on the road a lot, and I fell into this new relationship, and I was kind of like, you know, had like big questions I was coming to terms with at the age of sort of like 25 of like sexuality and identity and all that stuff. And Australia was like voting on same-sex marriage, and it was just like, it was this whole like cauldron of shit basically. And it meant that I, you know, was able to write a whole record about it. But when it came time to make it, I was like, I can't make this with anyone because like, you know, it will be like, it was a pretty like, it was an amazing process, but it was also a bit of a painful process. And Chris and Zach had become such good friends of mine. And so like that felt like a really safe space. But I couldn't imagine making it in like a big studio or something. It just didn't like feel right. And like going back to where I come from and being there the whole time with these two guys who I trust so much, it was just like, yeah, I don't think we sort of could have made this same record any other way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it turned out great. I love it.
Thanks.
And I'm not the only one that thinks that. So as far as the whole tech side of this
Mhm.
album, as producing it, obviously you guys used Ableton Live. In that process, was there anything as you were producing that like was kind of a new thing you learned working with these guys using Ableton Live, or something you didn't normally do?
I mean, yeah, we did like like a fair amount of stuff like in the box, and I the great thing about working with Chris and Zach was that like I've found often when I get into a studio, my sort of demo, what I call a demo, is like it's usually a pretty fully realized version of the song, and generally, probably just needs some drums tracked and some nicer sounding guitars or something to be like finished. But every time I've gotten into a studio before, the person I'm working with has always been like, no, let's just like go from scratch. Cause obviously they want to like, mold it in their own way. But Chris and Zach were so good because they like, we got in on the first day and like, I mean, I'd sent them all the demos and stuff, but we like listened through everything on the first day and they were like, this is like basically done. Like they were like, we just need to like go through each song and be like, what are the moments that we can like, make sound cooler, or what's like, how can we inject some more energy into this or
Yeah.
whatever else. There were definitely a few songs where we more like did this from scratch approach, but say like, airplane bathroom, like sandwiches, volcanic, radiator, all of those songs were essentially the demos that I'd made on Ableton in the back of the van in those 6 weeks like in the States.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, some of my like favorite things to do like from this record, I've always liked to use vocals in like not just a lyrical sense, like not just singing the words. And I really kind of went for that on this record. And generally a lot of it was achieved by using like the in the box guitar amps on Ableton, and
Yeah.
me just like sitting at a desk like this with a microphone and just like singing through those like amps in the box. That was like, the sort of all those shimmery vocals on like sandwiches. That was kind of how like I achieved that, which was really cool. And we also did like a lot of stuff with sort of pitch shifting, which I think like Ableton you really can't beat in that regard, because you can kind of go like I'm always like one for details, like really fine little details all the way through every song. And I just think like the way Ableton works with just being able to get so micro, like, down to the putting bars into the sort of 32s, and being able to like, pitch shift stuff by sense and, all of that. That was like something that I like really, really relied on to kind of bring a bit of like interest to this record. And, another thing that Chris and Zach were big on was also like reamping.
Mm.
So when we weren't kind of in the box, it was mostly because we were sort of taking something that we'd already recorded. I'd bought this like Fostex tape machine from like Gumtree. So we like ran a lot of stuff back through that. And then we also found this like old stereo in the shearing shed that had this like big wasp's nest in it. And so we like banged out the wasp's nest, and then like Chris and Zach sort of took apart the back of the stereo and basically fed like the, like reamped tracks like back through the stereo and back into
Wild.
which was just like, I watched them do that specific thing. And I was like, I said to them both, I was like, this is exactly how I wanted you guys to be here. Just because like, all of I'd be like, I want it to be more like this. And they had like the exact sort of like technical translation for kind of how to achieve that, which was really cool.
This is a pretty wild journey. You're in a tiny little shed fighting wasps and reamping. That sounds like a journey.
There was so many flies. Like if you listen to the end of the last song, Free Association, closely, there's just heaps of flies. Like you can like we were all like sitting still and would just put a mic on and just record all the flies in the room and then put it all into the kind of outro of that song.
That's when you know they're true friends, is you can sit there and do that for hours together, like hunched together, picturing you in this tiny little like cabin, this little cave in a dark room fighting flies.
Yeah, it was so good.
Amazing. Well, you've worked with multiple producers and engineers over the years, and a lot of the people listening to this podcast are, say, newer producers, or they've been producing for maybe 5 to 10 years, and maybe they want to start working with more artists, whether it's just for out of interest or for hire. In all the different producers and engineers you've worked with over the years, what would you say are the most key skill sets in working with a producer? Like talking to these producers listening right now, like what advice would you give to them wanting to work with artists like yourself or whoever?
I think I think to, I would encourage you to not think about making a record in a strictly technical or musical sense. I think the best producers I work with like talk about making music or talk about recording like it's not that. Like it's, they talk about like colors and smells and vibes. And, it's sort of like when we went into making this record, it was like we were sort of trying to achieve a feeling. And I think, kind of throwing out the rule book sometimes and being prepared to do that, is a really cool way to go about it. And generally you'll probably achieve something way more, unique by doing that.
Yeah.
And also just, I think, especially for sort of young female producers out there, like, you'll always sit in a room and be like, I don't know enough, or like, I don't know, like, I'm not kind of there. I'm not there yet. I'm not good enough to go and like have this role in this record or whatever. But you totally are. Like, there's kind of no, I don't know, there's no sort of, I don't look at it like there's a prerequisite knowledge you have to make a record. I bought Ableton in like probably 2016 or 2017. And I literally remember YouTubing, like, how do I like set a metronome, so like that was 5 years ago or something. Yeah. And then, 4 years later, I essentially made a record on that software. So like, I think that be prepared to sort of not know, but like the not knowing is kind of where it gets cool, because I think, once you get so dependent on your tips and tricks, it's actually quite hard to get out of those habits. But I think the zone where the magic happens is like the unknown, where you're just like, I don't know how to do this thing, or I don't know how to do what I'm trying to achieve. So I'm just going to like do a whole lot of trial and error. And then you end up like coming up with something really unique.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with all of that. And I think about my own experiences when I produce under my artist name, Philia. Like, my favorite songs are the songs where I was like the most playful and I just started doing weird shit without even thinking about what I was doing. I just started turning knobs and I was like, oh, there's a happy accident. Like, that's perfect. I'm going to do more of that, and getting in that mindset of like not having to be too technical. Everything has to be the same way.
Yeah, totally.
That playfulness.
Just like following on that sort of idea of playfulness, like one morning we came in when we were making this record and we were gonna like record the song Extraordinary Life from this record, and each night we would like put a blanket over the drums, and we always like, this is a stupid joke, we'd be like, we're gonna tuck them in and like send them off to sleep. And then we came in one morning and it was kind of cold, and like we were like, oh, we need to track some like drums today, and like Zach like sat on the stool and like but had the blanket on it, and then he sort of tucked himself like into the blanket, so he was kind of like one with the drums, and then he just sort of started like playing the drums under the blankets, and we were like, that actually sounds awesome. And so that is what like the weird kind of drum sound on Extraordinary Life is just him playing the drums like with a blanket over the top. And so like, when you're producing something, just be prepared to to go down some like weird rabbit holes, and if there are happy accidents, to really embrace them.
Yeah, no, definitely 100%. I think another good example of that, I talked to my podcast a long time ago, is I had this goose epidemic outside of this like giant window. There's a lake right here, and there's literally hundreds of geese like once a year that just flood through here, and they're so loud and they're mating and they're fighting. It's just like, it's chaotic. And after a month, I was literally going to go insane. It was so loud. And I had to like re-edit my podcast over and over. I just had to edit them out with gating and everything. And so one day I just was out there. I was like, well, fuck it. So I just went out there and recorded them for like 15 minutes. And I brought it in and I put it in Ableton sampler and like stretched it and made this really fat synth line with a goose just like screaming at me. It was actually
that's unreal.
And it was like one of my favorite things I've ever done out of a terrible, mess of what was going on. But yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. And back to what you were saying a little bit earlier, you were talking about, young female producers or just any producer in general. I'm sure maybe you've heard of imposter syndrome, which is something that I still struggle with sometimes too, as an artist, where it's like you actually start doubting your abilities and doubting your success. and potential because you just never think it's going to be good enough. You're constantly comparing yourself to others. And so that's something that I have to constantly like fight myself out of getting that mental funk where it's like, I am good enough. I can achieve the results I want. Like I can do this. So
yeah, absolutely. I think that that's something that people struggle with like forever. And, you know, for me, that's always been like I need someone else to tell me that something I've done is fine. You know, like yeah, this is good enough to like press print on or whatever else. I think that there's an important part of that like you need someone, you know, you need people to give you feedback and advice, and you know all that stuff's really important. I'm not implying that you should just like totally cowboy it and go on your own, but there comes a certain time where you can be like, I have enough confidence to say I can actually like I can do this, you know. And like for me, most recently, that was when I was building the live show for the Opera House. And like previously, I've always been like someone else has to like make it because there's no way I could kind of do that. And I was like, man, no one knows these stems better than I do. Like I've poured over them for so many months. And so I was like, I'm just going to like give it a go. And so I had to go like building, you know, the actual session like for the Opera House show on Ableton Live. And I just did it. And then I finished it. And I was like, I compared it to some other stuff that other people had done or whatever. And I was like, I think this is fine. And there's sort of no moment where someone, you know, pushes you off and they're like, no, you can do everything on your own. I think you just have to kind of start doing it, you know, be prepared to make some mistakes, but that's kind of how you grow.
that's really cool. No, I love that. I remember my first Ableton session I made when I played my first big show. It was the most terrifying thing. You play and you're like, well, I hope I didn't mess this up. Everybody's about to find out. Hey, just wanted to give a quick reminder to go check out that Helix native plugin by Line 6 if you want to add a whole new arsenal of effects and analog distortion, pedals. If you're a guitar player, highly recommend you check it out. There's a free trial, but also you can get a discount right now for St. Paddy's Day. So go to line6.com, check them out. Also wanted to give a shout out to Melodics for supporting this podcast. It's a desktop app you can download. You definitely should go do that. Give it a try. It's a free trial. And if you decide to join the subscription plan, then use the discount code LPO-20. That's LPO-20. Save 20%. And it's a great way to level up your skills playing on your MIDI controllers or your electronic drums. So check that out. Big shout out to Line 6 and Melodics supporting this episode. And back to today's podcast. But that's especially at the Sydney Opera House. That's a big one. That's huge.
Yeah. It was.
Look like, if you don't mind us like nerding out a little bit, like as far as versus arrangement view, did you choose one or the other?
Yeah. So, I mean, we generally go into like session view.
You're playing top to bottom then.
Yeah. So it's sort of like from, you know, like from top down. And we generally like, you know, obviously like have like a click track, and then we have like, I kind of went through all the stems for every song, and I was like, I don't like having heaps in the session. Like I just like having just the details that we can't physically kind of play on stage that I think the performance would sort of suffer without. And so I sort of went through, and any of the big meaty synth lines, I was like, well, you know, the guy who plays synth for me, Mickey Kojak, he will be able to do those, and any kind of bass lines, take all those out. And like Mickey actually ran sort of his own sessions to get kind of all those like proper like synth patches. And he also runs his vocals as I do through a TC Helicon. And so we sort of have patches built for each song. And he started using a lot of like vocoder sort of stuff in this most recent set. Cool. And then Beck Goring, who's playing guitar for me, so she was playing electric guitar and also a bit of live bass and vocals, and her setup is just sort of totally live. And then the drummer, the guy who was playing with me at the time, Lockie West, he kind of runs the session from where he's sitting, and sort of like we have like an SPD and triggers on the tom and the snare and the kick that are all sort of, you know, programmed for like each song to trigger, you know, the specific sample from those sets. But he also had the SPD rig then running through a pedal train. So like for Aeroplane Bathroom and stuff, he could sort of like hit a sample and then put sort of like, you know, delays and like pitch shifting and all that kind of stuff kind of live. Awesome. Which worked really well. And then I like, you know, the sort of any like any really like synth rhythmic parts or like extra little kind of fairy dust moments that we just sort of can't physically play, they kind of go in their own track, and then we sort of have like a little perk track. And we have some BVs in the session as well, which we try to keep, pretty soft, but it's like because we had a couple of guys singing on stage. So it's generally more just for them to like, have a bit of confidence when they step up to the mic. But my like own setup then was at the Opera House. I had a grand piano, which I mean, I would put that on my rider every time if I could. But,
yeah, it was beautiful. I saw that piano.
Yeah, it was like this guy came to tune it like 3 times before I played it. I was like, man, I'm sure that it's totally fine, but it was really sweet. And then I like have my own sort of TC Helicon, which I use for different vocal patches, like harmonizers, vocoders, but I also use it as a looper. And then I had a little harmonium, which I like bought on Gumtree, our kind of equivalent of Craigslist, and it's just this beautiful kind of pump organ thing that I bought a few years ago.
Wait, what's that called? What's that called again?
It's called a harmonium.
Harmonium, yeah. Okay.
So it's like in used in like Indian traditional music, but it's been like I guess essentially appropriated to be used in a whole lot of different kinds of music. And I love organs, and it's the most transportable organ that I could literally find. So I kind of take it with me everywhere. And it just, it's a beautiful it's a reed instrument, like each note has double reed. But it's, so it's sort of like, sounds like strings, but also sounds like an organ, which was really cool. And then I have my like Maiden acoustic guitar, and I have a Fender Tele, and I was running my Fender Tele through an Eventide H9 pedal, which kind of had like, patches for each song, as well as just like a, like a drive and blue sky and, just a few other like nice things. I generally feel like with my live set, like my general philosophies are, to make it different from the record, like to give it some sort of energy that doesn't just exist in like pressing play on something. And also when it comes to gear, I like to spend money on, like spend good money on few things, so just like find pieces of gear like the TC Helicon or the H9 or whatever that are like really versatile. They can do heaps of different stuff. You can almost build patches for like each song on each of those things. And it means I don't have to carry around like heaps and heaps and heaps of pedals, but it's just sort of like those few things like execute what I'm trying to do, I think, the best that they can.
That makes so much sense. When I first started playing shows, I wish I would have listened to that philosophy. I'm a drummer, so I'm like, here comes Dan with his 5-piece drum set, and then also my guitar, and then also my APC 40 and my laptop, and then also I'm going to be playing this keyboard. And it's just
you were from Australia and you had to fly all that stuff over. I reckon that would have been the thing that changed your mind.
Yeah, I would just have to take a boat at that point, like this giant tugboat.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, I mean, it was a great setup. It was a great performance. Anybody listening, highly recommend. Go check it out on YouTube. I forget the exact name, but I'll put a link in the show notes. I'll find it.
Yeah. Basically,
Opera House, Gordi performance. Yeah. You'll find it.
Yeah.
We talked about live performance things, some of your setup. What are some future plans for your shows?
My sort of real sort of overarching plan for shows is to kind of have as many, one of those things you buy, like a blender or something, and it has all the different possible arrangements that you can have. So like I would have like a 5-piece, a 6-piece, a 1-piece, a 2-piece, a 3-piece. I think there's something really cool in doing that because, you get quite a different performance every time. Like these most recent shows I did, we played at the Forum in Melbourne, which is like holds thousands of people. And so we had like the full band, like absolutely everything. It sounded beautiful. And then the next night we're playing a regional, show in Victoria where it's like more like a school assembly kind of PA, and the show would sound terrible through that. So then for that night I did like a duo show, and in that kind of setting I've got like my Nord, I've got like a little Yamaha DX, I've got a little like one of those pocket pianos, and I kind of loop all of those to have some sort of like bassline arpeggios, and then sort of play stuff on top, and had like my mate playing some guitar. so just sort of like having different versions of the live show. I mean, I'd love to go like mega and like play with the like Sydney Symphony Orchestra or something one day. I think that would be like pretty nice. But yeah, in the meantime, like like having some different versions. I'm playing this little set next week in this really cool like art space in Sydney, and I sort of want to like come up with a version of the show which is a bit more like free flowing and sort of I don't know, like almost like one song just like melts into the next kind of thing. So it's like more like an interesting like performance piece rather than just like I'm going to play a record start to finish.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think looking at artists that I admire so much, like we've talked about already, but Bon Iver is a good example in that like all through kind of 2018 I played a lot of these festivals that Justin put together with like the Dessner brothers from the National and a few other musicians, and they would sort of put on these like collaborative festivals where you kind of rock up, you'd play with one person or another for a bit, and then they had these actual like festival days where they'd put you in this like setup and like 1,000 people would be sitting there and they were just like, you two just like play music for like 45 minutes and you just have to like kind of come up with some like improvised like set on the spot.
Yeah.
And like I want to sort of, I don't know, capture like a bit of that like energy in one of these styles of shows.
Yeah. Maybe you should just sample the crowd in the show. Some crowd engagement. Just throw a mic out there. Ableton.
I like that. Hopefully there'll be a few geese around.
Yeah, you're really into like sampling and field recording. You should start sampling your audience at shows. That'd be cool.
I like that a lot. Yeah. I did that once at this like Eau Claire festival, and like some audience member at a previous show I was doing had come up and given me a poem that they'd written, and I was like, that's really sweet. And then I was like, I don't know, it was just like a poem about like their experience of like being at this festival. And then I found myself on this like little stage in the middle of the woods with the artist Julian Baker, and she was just like playing some guitar through these amps, and I was sort of like looping a bunch of stuff. And so like I got this audience member to like read out a couple of lines from the poem that guy gave me, and it was like, saying all that sounds like the wankiest thing ever, but it actually was kind of cool.
Yeah, no, that is cool. That's awesome. Yeah, and I think when you get to a point as an artist where you have support and you can figure out how to be versatile with the venue or the show you're playing, whether that means bringing more people or having it more stripped down just yourself, I think that's a really valuable place to be, because then you could play more shows in different scenarios, reach more fans, connect with more people.
I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's it. And I think like, as I mean, the last thing I would ever want is for someone to come along to my show and feel disappointed, that they like didn't hear like what they wanted to hear or whatever. But I think if you do sort of create a bit of that energy of like, you don't know exactly what you're going to get when you come to this show, and people almost then, it's like a different kind of investment. People aren't just coming to like hear that one song that they loved on the radio or whatever. They're coming for like an experience from start to finish. And I think that's kind of the ultimate goal.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's good stuff. Well, what future tracks or things do you have in the works right now?
Yeah, so I've been working on a few different kind of collaborations with people. I just put one out a couple of weeks ago with another Australian artist, Alex Leahy, and I've been doing a few others like here and there, and I'm sort of starting to like kind of finally turn my mind to like properly writing again. Like I'm always sort of writing like bits and pieces. Like, so I've probably got 3 or 4 demos saved in a Dropbox folder. But like I need to sort of start doing it with a bit more intention. So this cool performance space that I was talking about before in Sydney, it's called Phoenix Central, and it's like sort of newly built by this like some like philanthropist woman who just wants to like watch art and have a good time. And I'm going to go there in like a month and do like a writing like residency thing there. So yeah, which would be cool. I'm really hoping like I'm going to take as much of my like kind of rig as I can and just set up there and probably try and write another record.
That's cool. Building off of that, do you have a typical process that you use when writing? Do you normally start with just vocals, or do you what does that look?
Yeah, I've tried to sort of write like at least start writing the song without a computer. So generally, like I start by like with just a guitar or just a piano or something, and then I mean like Volcanic from my last record is a good example. Like I wrote that song on the piano with the piano part, and then we actually just like took the piano part out of it, until the very end of the song for the final recording. So it's not always that the song finishes on that, but I think like I sort of need to have some kind of like anchor that I can like play, or as in I have so far, but I'm sort of into this idea of which I think I'll explore when I'm going to do this writing this time around, of like just sort of finding one sample or one sound like that's not necessarily sort of chords or whatever, but like one sort of sound or sample that kind of is the anchor, so that will sort of like spark each like song. So that's kind of the new idea that I'm going to move forward with and see what sort of results come about.
If you want my goose sample, I could send it to you.
I would love that. Yes.
The anchor for the entire album. Yeah, just
throughout.
it'll be great. That's what the people want. Really,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Well, Sophie, it was so good hanging out with you. I want to read
Me too.
time. Yeah, definitely excited for the new tracks you have coming up. Congratulations on your
Thanks.
recent album, sort of recent, and with like the newer stuff you have going on. Excited to see
Thank you.
what else you do. So
Yeah, thanks for having me.
yeah, absolutely. Yo, thanks everybody for checking out the podcast. Quick reminder, if you want to grab my free Ableton Live 11 shortcuts, go to liveproducersonline.com/live11shortcuts and download it for free. Also, you will be subscribed to the newsletter, so you'll receive emails and be the first to know when new podcast episodes come out and other cool stuff. Also, if you want to purchase Ableton Live 11, I'd be glad to hook you up with a discount. Just go to liveproducersonline.com/buyableton. Big thanks to Line 6 and Melodics and Gordi for making this episode happen, and I will see you guys next time.